All right, welcome everyone to today's webinar titled Common Expressions That Sabotage or Could Sabotage Team Spirit. So how our everyday language can impact collaboration, trust, and clarity. So today we're not really talking about strategy or performance, at least not directly. We'll be talking about what quietly shapes all of that. Our words, our language habits, our go-to phrases that we use with good intentions for sure, but that sometimes have just the opposite effect. So, phrases like or expressions like, you're all leaders. There are no bad ideas. We're like a family here. They sound great, don't they? And yet, these phrases or expressions can trigger some level of resistance. They could even plant doubt or just quietly erode trust. So today, we're stepping back. We're looking at what we say and what it actually creates and how we can say it differently with more clarity, more alignment, and most of all, more credibility. So why did we organize this webinar? Because we often don't realize just how much our language shapes our team dynamics until maybe we hit a wall.
Sorry,
So
Micheline,
today's webinar.
I don't think you shared your screen yet.
Oh, thank you, Hallie. All right.
No worries.
All
There we
right.
go.
So why this webinar? Yes, because we don't always realize how much our language shapes our team dynamics until we might hit a wall. So today's webinar is because we want to avoid resistance that can be caused by unclear or just misleading expressions. Today's webinar is because we want to understand how even positive messages can backfire. Today's webinar is because we want to protect a safe and respectful and trusting environment. And today's webinar is because we want to be better at choosing our words so that they foster clarity, consistency, and collaboration. So let's take a quick look at this diagram that you probably know by heart by now if you've participated at a few free trainings or just regular trainings with us. It's our management and leadership expectations. I won't go through the whole diagram, but let's remind ourselves that when we do step into leadership and management roles, our words are never neutral. They set the tone, they signal our intent, and they quietly shape how people interpret our messages, the rules, even when those rules aren't clearly stated. And that matters. That matters because we're expected to deliver on two levels. As manager, we're expected to clarify, to organize, to structure. And as leaders, they inspect us, our employees, our troops, our teams, inspect us to inspire, to engage, and to influence. But if our words create confusion, or they overload, or they create ambiguity, we can't lead well, and we can't manage well either. So this webinar isn't about playing with words. It's about choosing words that work, words that motivate without manipulating, that foster accountability without adding invisible pressure, so that bring clarity without rigidity. So the agenda for today is quite simple. It's short, it's sharp, it's practical. So we'll cover 4 types of expressions, why they backfire, and what to say instead. So each of these categories reveals a blind spot, words that sound good, but create some invisible friction. So the first category will be about clarity killers. They are expressions that blur what should be clear. Collaboration killers. They're usually expressions that invite collaboration, invite input, but they don't really create follow-through. And there's culture killers. So those are expressions that harm trust and some level of psychological safety. There's credibility killers. These expressions, they always sound good, they sound great, but they fall flat in practice. So we'll be looking at all these through a lens of what's the trap, what's the risk when we use them, what should we be saying instead, and the impact that it could have on our team. So 4 categories of expression that we want to avoid in order to maintain a collaborative environment. So what is a collaborative environment? It is a team environment where individual and collective contributions fuel synergy and people work together to help the organization thrive. So it's not just about working together. It's really about aligning individual efforts toward shared success. And to do that, we often do that through communication. So this is why we have a whole webinar on communication, more specifically, expressions to avoid and some to use. So let's start with the first category, clarity killers. So as I said earlier, they blur what should actually be clear. So let's talk about phrases that are meant to empower but end up confusing. When we blur some lines, even with good intentions, we make it harder for people to know what is actually expected, what they own, and where they stand. So the first one, it's funny because I first saw it on a billboard outside of school. And at the time I was a school principal. And for some reason, that expression really made me think about what it meant. And this is one of the times that I got interested in expressions. So you're all leaders. You're all leaders. It sounds inspiring, right? But if no one's officially responsible, or if not everyone sees themselves as a leader, it creates silence or even overreach. So instead, we should be highlighting the context. When can someone actually show leadership without having to carry the title? So let's look at the trap. You're all leaders. So the trap is that you assume as a colleague or as a manager leader that everyone wants to be a leader, that everyone wants to lead or is even ready to lead or is even interested in leading. So there's a trap, and the risk when we use that expression is that we create confusion about what's expected and we can blur some accountability. So instead of saying you're leaders, think of highlighting specific situations where someone could actually demonstrate some level of leadership, but without having the formal leadership role. So here's an example of what someone could say. Here's a situation where you could step up and lead. I'll go through a bit of more details on the third expressions, but instead of attributing someone the role, we attribute a situation where one can actually and is capable and is interested to step up and lead. We'll go into more details in a few minutes about that one. So when we highlight a situation instead of a role, it encourages realistic initiative. We don't create pressure, we don't create confusion. People have some leadership roles, others don't, but there are situations where you can actually step up and lead a dossier or some people. So you're all leaders. There's another one that is a clarity killer, and it goes like this: act like you own it. So here's the catch about this one. We're asking for the mindset of an owner, but we're not giving them the keys. So recently we've rented an apartment. So if I were to say to my tenants, act as if you own the apartment, but I don't actually give them the keys or all the responsibilities, it's hard for them to actually act like they own it. So that creates some frustration. So instead of the big metaphor, name the specific behavior you're looking for. For example, I care for this resource, or adopt a long-term thinking, or something like that. So let's look at this one a bit more into more details. Act like you own it. The trap, you're aiming, of course, that's the good intention. You're aiming for engagement, ownership, empowerment, but you're not giving people real authority or recognition. So here's the risk about this one. It creates a cynicism. People feel that you expect more from them without more freedom, more pay, more support, or even more power, such as decision-making power. So the tip is to be specific about what you expect. That's why this one is in the clarity killer. Be specific about what you expect. You could say, for example, treat this resource like it needs to last. Or you could say, handle this as if you're responsible for how it's used. So it's a bit more specific, it's a bit more targeted, and it's a bit more clear about what you expect. So when you use more clarity, it promotes a more responsible and engaged mindset. People know what is expected of them. And that is without creating confusion about roles or ownership. Now, remember the first expression was everyone is a leader. And I was starting to say, well, mention that they can show some leadership. So we have to also be careful about this one, because this one is often used in moments of tension, but it's still a bit too vague to be useful. So what does leadership actually look like in the moment, in the situation? Am I talking about initiative? Am I talking about supporting a colleague? Am I talking about refocusing a group? So I need to spell it out. I need to be explicit about what my expectations are when someone is showing leadership. So the trap is, it's a vague expression. Leadership means something to me, and it could mean something completely different to you, and still we could have too good understanding of what leadership is, but it's just different. So when we're too vague and we don't define the leadership behavior that we're looking for, people will interpret what leadership is in different ways. And that leads to misunderstandings or misalignment. So the tip, just describe the specific behavior you expect. You know it's a leadership behavior. You can mention leadership, but add the specifics to it. It could be something like, lead this meeting and help the team stay on track. Help them stay focused on the subject. Answer questions when there are questions. Reply to comments when there are comments. So be specific about what your expected behavior or behaviors are. When we are more specific about our expectations, it turns an abstract idea into a clear and very actionable behavior that builds actually confidence and clarity. The fourth one in this category is one that I've used myself too often in the past. And of course, it was with good intention, but you'll see it can backfire. It's easy. How many times has this been said to me, or have I said it to others? It's always said with good intentions, but it can feel dismissive. If I'm struggling and you're telling me it's easy, I likely keep that struggle to myself. So we should be saying things like it's doable, I'm here if you need me, and that will keep the door open. So let's look at it's easy. What's the trap? Well, yeah, you're trying to reassure, but may unintentionally minimize the actual effort that is involved. Because what's easy for me might be somewhat easy for you, or even very difficult for you. We all have different level of capacities. So keep that in mind. When we often say it's easy, it's easy, it's easy, you can do it, it discourages those who find it difficult, and it might even prevent them from seeking support on your behalf. So the tip is to use a language that is motivational, but that also acknowledges some effort without making people feel inadequate. So you could say something like, it's achievable with a bit of practice. Or I'm pretty confident that you can accomplish this, and I'm here to guide you or to help you when you need it. So instead of saying just, it's easy, the impact, it will motivate while respecting different learning curves and confidence level. So there are four expressions that we came up for this category, clarity killers. If you have some ideas of what other expressions you've heard or even you've used that could kill clarity or harm clarity, feel free to put them in the chat so that we can also learn from you. Let's move along with collaboration killers. So those are expressions that sound inclusive, and they're meant to be inclusive. But the conditions for meaningful contribution are missing. Sometimes we feel like we've opened the door to collaboration, but we forgot to build the room. There's just a door. There's no actual room for collaboration. So these are phrases that really sound inclusive, but they don't really offer support or actually support participation in a structured and meaningful way. So I think we came up with 3 or 4 in this category. Let's look at the first one that, again, I've used too many times in my past, but learned not to use so much nowadays. There are no bad ideas, or all ideas are good. So of course, when we use that expression, we want to be open. But that openness needs a frame. Without the frame, we risk invalidating people and what they're sharing, or making others afraid to speak. So set the tone. Yes, ideas are welcome, but yes, you'll be choosing based on fit, based on client satisfaction, based on client needs, based on tendencies, based on the criteria that you need to work with, depending on who your funder is, and so on. So it just needs a bit more structure. There are no bad ideas, or all ideas are welcome, because I think we all know some ideas just don't fit. And without a framework, this sounds disingenuous. When we use that expression without clarity or without adding some details, we risk feeding some cynicism when ideas are actually dismissed or ignored. I thought you wanted my bad idea. You said all ideas were good, that there were no bad ideas. So why aren't you considering my idea? Just set clear expectations up front. Explain that all ideas might be welcome, but decisions will follow certain criteria. Or you could say something like, I want to hear ideas that would help improve our clients' satisfaction. I want to hear ideas that will facilitate participants using this and this and that when we do some trainings. So it's just clearer expectations up front so that ideas don't go all over the place. Yeah, so here's an example. Let's generate some ideas, or as many ideas as we can. Then we'll choose the ones that align with client satisfaction, our goals, our priorities, our values, and so on. The more we are clear upfront with our expectations, the more we promote creativity in a very respectful and productive space where people know what to expect. So they have a mindset of what is expected of them when they share ideas. So yes, sometimes there are bad ideas, or not all ideas are good. So a red flag with this one. The other one, I hear often, and I've used that one myself. We value innovation. Here we're a department, we are a organization or business that value innovation. Innovation is good. We want to innovate. Let's innovate. So innovation is a great value, of course, when it's purposeful. If you've met Alain before, he would be the first one to say, to innovate just for the sake of innovating is not purposeful. When it becomes a buzzword, people feel like nothing is ever stable. So instead, yes, give permission to innovate when it makes sense, when it's relevant. When something's stuck or no longer serving, it's time to innovate. But to innovate all the time, to be constantly innovating, can be dangerous. So here's the trap. It can feel like innovation is required constantly, even when things are working well. There's an old expression out there that says, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. It's a bit like that when we value innovation too much. So when it's always about innovation and being able to innovate and to do things differently and to improve on everything, we can create fatigue, we can create confusion, and even discredit proven practices that could be serving us well without innovating. So frame innovation as the ability to question the status quo when needed, to solve real problems or improve things that are no longer effective. So when it is time to fix a problem, when it is time to do better because data or surveys or whatever information you have is telling you to fix something or to improve on something or to do things differently, then it is time. So we could be saying something like, let's pause for a second on the way we do things, and let's explore other ways, because this and that is no longer working. When you frame innovation, you foster an agile and relevant culture that honors what works while staying open to better options. So innovation. The other one, again, guilty of having used it a bit too often in the past, and I'm trying to be careful about this one. So we work collaboratively. Let's work together on this, in other words. Well, collaboration is not a default setting. It's a choice that needs to be defined. So collaboration cannot mean something for my colleague Hallie, something different for me, and something different for another colleague. We need to be clear on what is expected out of that collaboration. Are we brainstorming something? Are we building something together? Are we consulting before making a big decisions? So clarifying what turns collaboration from chaos into flow. We need to be specific because we all have a good but different understanding of what working together means or collaboration means. When we assume that everyone understands what collaboration means, and we don't take time to define it, we create confusion about who decides what, who does what, and how the work moves forward. So the tip here is to be clear, it's to be explicit. Define what collaboration is, define what the teamwork is, who's consulting, who's creating, who's coordinating, who's doing what, assign roles, clarify responsibilities, clarify even opportunities for decisions, timelines, and so on. So we could be saying things like, we're building this project together, and each of us will own a specific part. Micheline, you'll be doing this. Alain, you'll be doing this. Julie, you'll be responsible for that. Hallie, you'll be responsible for that follow-up. But we're building something together, which each of us having a specific role. The more we are clear, the more we reduce misunderstandings, we clarify expectations, and we probably strengthen the team alignment, and we probably have better results as well. So that was that for that category, collaboration killers. If you're thinking about more expressions that you've heard or that you use, please put them in the chat. We'd like to know what they are and learn from you. Let's continue with our third category, culture killers. Their words, their expressions, their go-to phrases that quietly impact team atmosphere and relationships, and often without even anyone noticing. So culture isn't built in big declarations. Culture is shaped in everyday little behaviors and phrases. And these ones, they might seem harmless, even friendly, but they can erode trust or comfort without us realizing it. So let's just take a step back today and ponder on these. So one, again, guilty, I've used it before, and I don't think I've used it in the last year, just because I know that even if I use it with good intention, it can actually mean different things to different people. So we're like a family here. Well, what if I come from a dysfunctional family? We're like a family here. So this, of course, this one is tricky. It aims to build belonging, cohesiveness, and so on. But families, they come with different expectations, different values, different behaviors, and so on and so on. So instead of naming it for what it is, name it for what you want it to be. Probably a strong and supportive team. So here's the trap. You're trying to build a strong bond within the team, with the team members, but we're actually blurring professional boundaries. And when we do that, we create expectations of loyalty, personal closeness, or even emotional over-involvement. So let's be careful when we use that expression. We're like a family here. The tip is to talk instead about team spirit, mutual respect, support, without erasing professional structure. I think that's even harder in smaller teams than in bigger teams, but I've heard it in very large organizations. We should be saying things like, we work together with respect and support like a real team. Or we tell each other, we address issues among each other when issue arise like a real team does. The impact, fostering a healthy sense of belonging without overstepping emotional or role boundaries. A second one, again, guilty, just be yourself, be you. Who you are is okay. That is great advice if you've made the space safe for that. Otherwise, people won't know what version of themselves is acceptable. What if being myself is being arrogant, dishonest, not trustworthy? So invite authenticity, but make sure that the conditions are there, like respect, clear boundaries, and so on. So just be yourself. It's a trap because we're promoting authenticity without making it really safe to do so. Because if I am really being myself, I could get into trouble. So people may share openly and face unintended consequences for being really true to their character. So the tip, yes, of course, create safe spaces for expressions, but with clear guidelines around respect and listening. So we could be saying something like, I want to hear your thoughts. Please share your ideas on this or on that. And let's do this in a way that is respectful for the client, respectful for different ideas around the table, respectful for the one presenting the project, and so on. So just have a clear guidelines of what kind of ideas and behaviors you would like to see and hear. The more you are clear, the more you support real diversity of thought and presence in a structure that prevents harm or overexposure. Here's another one that I've heard quite often. We're all in the same boat. And of course, when we say that, we want to unify people. We want to bring people together. So yes, this one can feel unifying, but it erases or minimizes the differences in pressure. Some are rowing, some are steering, some are bailing water. So instead of pretending that it's equal for everyone, acknowledge the uneven weight and show that you actually see it. So yes, you're trying to build unity, but while ignoring the reality of different roles, different pressures, or even different experiences. And when we do that, we minimize what some of us are going through, making them maybe feel unseen or misunderstood or even isolated. So instead of saying we're all in the same boat or things like that, let's emphasize on collective effort. That way we acknowledge that some people may have heavier burdens than others. We could be saying something like, yeah, we're in this project together. We're all working on this project together. And I know the impact isn't the same for everyone at the same time. I know HR is really bombarded with questions while IT might be having a little break right now. But we're all in this together and we'll be working this together. That way we encourage empathy and team support without denying real differences in experience or stress or burden. So let's move to the fourth killer, the credibility killers. So let's look at those. Those are expressions that sound good. They sound great, but they fall flat in practice. So credibility killers, they're those polished phrases, the ones we see in posters or mission statements. The risk, if they're not backed by action or consistency, they actually might damage the credibility of a leader. So if, as a manager leader, I constantly tell my teammates, my employees, my troops, be authentic, be true, be yourself. Huh? It's about the one that we saw a bit earlier. We often encourage others to be authentic, but how often do we model it? So let's look at this one. We promote a value, but that value can always be supported in practice or even be modeled. The risk about this one is some people might not feel safe being themselves, or they might fear being judged when they truly are. And it actually is inappropriate to be authentic. So you don't know what my authenticity really look like. Is it appropriate in the workplace or is it not? So the tip here, set the tone. Set the tone yourself, because what you're probably wanting to say is be humble, be vulnerable, admit mistakes, own your limits. Don't try to be perfect. Let go of the need to appear perfect. Be humble, practice vulnerability. So we could say things like, oh gosh, I got that wrong. Thanks for putting it out for me. Or I need help. Or I'm sorry I did this. This is how I'm going to repair my mistake. So that is being perfectly imperfect. That's being humble, vulnerable. The nuance is small, but it's big enough to make the difference between authentic and humble and vulnerable. Whenever you set the tone and you're humble and you practice vulnerability, you're creating and building a culture of honesty and trust, one that is really lived, not just preached or not just sexy words on a t-shirt. The next one, we've tapped into it a little bit too. Let's look at it. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Yes, but not all opinions build trust or respect. If an opinion undermines dignity or inclusion or is racist, we can't just let it sit there. As leaders, we need to name what's not okay and what's okay and really draw the line where it matters. So we have to be careful about allowing everyone being entitled to their opinion. Because you make it sound like all opinions should be voiced and respected, even those that would go against fundamental values. So you open the door to offensive or even discriminatory comments, and it becomes harder to intervene or to hold others accountable when they actually voice their entitled opinion. So instead of saying that, clarify that free expression exists, but again, as we mentioned earlier, within boundaries or within shared values like respect, inclusion, professionalism, as long as those are not just buzzwords, as long as they're defined and that they're defined, yes, explained, but that we can actually understand what their observable behaviors are. So we could say things like, we welcome ideas that move us forward in line with our shared values. We have so many clients that have a cloudy document, and they have chosen 3, maybe 4 at the most, 5 operational or organizational values. And that really helps understand what kind of behaviors and attitudes are expected and which one are not tolerated. So the more you are clear about values, behaviors, attitude, the more you create a space where people feel free to speak up and safe from harm or disrespect. The other one, we're all equals here. So yeah, we all deserve to be respected, absolutely. But pretending that there are no hierarchies or power dynamics can actually create more tension. Be transparent about roles while showing that everyone is important or that their voice matters. So it's just to be careful with the choice of words here. We're all important here would probably be easier and more true to say than we're all equals. When we use that expression, we tend to overlook the real differences in roles, in power, in responsibility, and in authority. Usually in a team or in an organization, someone needs to have the last word. Someone needs to be in charge. So we might create, well, there's the risk. We might create frustration or even distrust when the illusion of equality equality clashes with reality. So what do you mean, Michelin, we're all equals here? How come you're deciding this? How come you have the last word on that? How come you get to decide? Yeah, because we're not all equal, but we're all important and we all have important roles. So the tip, differentiate between equal respect and equal roles. Acknowledge everyone's importance, everyone's contribution, while being transparent about structure. So every role matters here, even if responsibilities aren't the same. So that's one way of giving good feedback to employees. When you do this, it helps us move towards this, or it helps the team or the organization succeed. So it's more when you do this, and so on. So instead of saying we're equals, the more we reinforce that everyone is important, that every role matters, we reinforce a culture that is more fair, honest, and grounded in real dynamics. All right, we've looked at 4 categories of expressions that could harm or kill collaboration, clarity, trust, credibility. Now let's look at the trap of the trap, the bigger trap. So the feel-good language that sometimes could backfire. So what sounds great isn't always what works. The real question is this: do my words match what I expect and what I'm prepared to support? When they do, you do gain trust, but when they don't, people will actually tune out. So the trap about feel-good language is using phrases that do sound great. They're feel good. We think that they're meant to motivate or to engage, but we don't always realize how they're interpreted or received sur le terrain. The risk: your words create confusion, misalignment, unrealistic expectations, or even distrust. So what was meant to inspire can end up exhausting, isolating, or most of all, frustrating your team. So the tip, easier said than done sometimes, but before you speak, ask yourself, do my words actually reflect what I expect or what I really mean? Or am I just using a buzz expression? The more you are clear, the more you'll become a more conscious and credible and aligned leader. Your language becomes a tool for clarity, for trust, for real engagement, and not an invisible barrier to team spirit. So there we go, the bigger trap of all traps. So gang, this was our last webinar before summer break. So we want to thank you at Discretis for your energies, your ideas, being engaged throughout the season. We'd love to see you after the summer. And while you might be vacationing, we'll be working hard for you guys. We're working on our next free trainings and webinars for the fall. So please scan the QR code. We would like to know what topics you'd like us to cover in the next webinar series. So we're looking at general topics like leadership, management, team cohesiveness, organizational health, everything that has to do with the human aspect of the work. So let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. Please scan the QR code. Next step, so as you may know by now, we do record our webinars and they will be shared in our newsletter. So in order to get the free webinars, you need to be subscribed. If you already are subscribed, you don't need to subscribe again. But if you're not, please do so that you get the recordings. Now, it could be about expressions, it could be about communications, it could be about team spirit, team collaboration, it could be about almost anything. If you would like to share your challenges with one of our experts, please scan the QR code. It'll give you a free 30-minute meetings, no obligations. We're not trying to sell anything, but sometimes just saying out loud what we're thinking can help us move forward. So don't hesitate to book a meeting with one of our experts. Have a great summer, guys, and we can't wait to see you in the fall.